Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the what do you think about like the image, any images of Artemis or Diana, comparing those to those images of Mary? Do you see
So
any?
my favorite comparison is of the dark stone. So what we call the Black Madonnas and the Black Artemis.
Oh yeah, I see that.
So that is a really direct correlation between Mary and Artemis. And it has a lot to do with this idea of like earthy mother, the black stone. So the black stone is sometimes seen as a meteorite. So early black stone goddesses were made out of meteorite that had fallen from the sky. And so they were thought to have like magical powers, or, you know, I don't know, the kind of feels that meteorites have. And so then that became a trend to create dark stoned goddesses and the dark stoned Madonna, the Black Madonna. And then people argue, there's some scholars that argue that the dark stone represents like the earthiness of the goddess, the womb,
Really?
the dark. Yeah. Like, so there's a lot of.
We were just talking about this too, and I just looked it up. Semele has that etymology of earth.
Yeah.
Earth mother.
Not surprised. Yeah.
Huh. But anyways, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I think because there's something there about the cosmic womb, you know, it feels like it goes back to, I remember when I went to Athens one time to this museum, they had these, I call them like fry pan artifacts, but they don't have them anymore. And they were these black stone artifacts, and they looked like a fry pan. And inside the artifact itself, and you can't even find them online. I remember seeing entire walls of them, but we couldn't take pictures of them because they had discovered them, and then they probably stuck them in the back room somewhere. But each one of these black stones inside had like some kind of image of like a city or like a house or a deer or whatever. And then as the pan kind of narrows down here, it had like this pubic triangle, which is that first symbol of humanity. And this idea that the black stone represents the womb and the cosmic womb, the womb of the universe. And then and that's, you know, these are Neolithic pieces. So if we move forward 3,000 years, 4,000 years, we still see that there is this mystery around black stone and how black stone still continues to represent like cosmic deity, but in darkness. Do you know what I mean? Not like bright light, not like the way we think about like halo lights or like, you know, sparkling vampires or something. Today we tend to think about divinities as sparkling, as shiny. But there was a time when people thought about divinities as like dark, cosmic, night, you know, womb.
Yeah.
And so it's not an accident that the Black Madonnas are found throughout the world. Some people say they're dug out of the earth. You know, there's legends around them, and that there are miracles around them. There's a lot of miracles around them in South America. There's a lot of miracles in France. You know, there's lots of miracles around them. And then the interesting thing is that there is a really great, I'm just pulling it up there, but you could probably pull it up too. There's a really great statue of Artemis of Ephesus in this black stone. So her hands and feet are black and her face is black stone, right? Which, as a side note, I argue that this proves that the stuff on her chest is not boobs, because had it been boobs, they would have also been black stone. But okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. So that is like a visual connection, but it's more than visual because it's artistry. Someone is taking the time to make Artemis in this black stone, and then someone is taking the time to make Mary in this black stone. So it's almost like a creative connection.
Yeah. That's it's a lot there. But that makes, so do you think okay, that's interesting for Mary. Do you see anything like that with Artemis other than the one that you were just describing? Is there any other black stone images of Artemis? Isn't there if I'm not mistaken, isn't there a Roman version?
That's the one.
That's the one you're talking about. Okay.
That's the one. So it's a later version, which it works for Mary because
it's fine. Yeah, it's later.
It's closer to Mary.
Right. It shows the borrowing of ideas.
That's right. That's right. Um,
If the Roman Latins that are still pagans are depicting Artemis in the same way as these Christians are, that says something about the times.
right, right. So that way it works. But going backwards, it's the only black stone that we found so far of Artemis. Certainly, I don't expect it of the Greek Artemis, the huntress representation. Which, I mean, again, I take that for granted because I don't expect it. But I don't expect it because the Artemis of Ephesus has a mothering nature. And so of course I expect her to be in Blackstone because it's about creating. It's about the cosmic womb. Where the Greek Artemis as a huntress would not be in Blackstone because she's not seen as like a cosmic womb. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Artemis of Ephesus, really, because she's so influenced by Cybele. In fact, I would argue she takes over the Anatolian Kybele. Well, the
Really?
Greeks, yeah, I mean the Greeks. I
And
mean,
that's the Great Mother, and
yes,
it's very easy to compare the Great Mother to this
yes,
Mother Mary figure. They both have a lot of overlap happening there.
yes,
And
yes,
so if Artemis is literally taking on the Great Mother role,
yes,
then I'm not then we can go from there to not being surprised if there's overlap between Artemis and Mary. You know what I mean?
yes. So in this book that I'm writing, Neil. So what happened? Okay, I want to do a short chronology. So the Anatolian Kybele is here and there and in Anatolia, let's say, and in Ephesus, and predates. I think one of the oldest carvings that we have of her is outside of a cave wall, outside of a cave on a wall. It's like 6th century BCE. It's very, very old, and she's sitting down with her lions. So
Yeah, that's the famous one.
right, so we know that she was in this area. And so what a lot of scholarship shows is that as the Greeks took over this area, because Cybele was not just mother of the gods, but of the wilderness and mistress of animals, the Greeks went, oh yeah, we have one of those. Her name is Artemis. And so there is this transition in which Artemis takes over Cybele's role. However, for some reason, the Greeks could not deter the Ephesians from adapting their Greek Artemis or their concept to Cybele, in the sense of like the statue of Artemis at Ephesia still carries a lot of Cybele's characteristics. So it was almost like a push and pull tension for 1,000 years, while the Greeks are trying to impose their traditions, and those that were already indigenous to this area are trying to maintain their traditions. And the Artemis of Ephesus is a compromise of that push and pull.
So then you can say if that's the natural progression of culture, you can then it's just all it is another step to add Mary into this evolution of culture. And so if Mary's filling in that role, the same role that the Great Mother always played for a long time, and then Artemis jumps in, and then Mary.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I would say that the slight difference is that Artemis becomes heavily associated with bees. And like heavily associated with bees. So again, this is cultural adaptation.
The Ephesus coins always have bees on them.
Right? There's lots of bee. So this is, again, cultural development. Cybele is not as associated with bees. Not that she isn't, but there's a strong association with Artemis. And Mary takes a lot of that. Like Mary is often referred to as the honeybee, the virgin bee. So I would say that there is a bit of a step. Well, I mean, what you're saying is true too. If you take Mary sort of in pieces and pull back, you could see Cybele, of course. But I think that they kind of, those videos where they have the Greek gods dancing now, they're like a big thing on Instagram.
Yeah.
And you know how they change shapes, right? I kind of feel like that would be perfect for what happens between Cybele, Artemis, and Mary. It's like they're kind of dancing.
Yeah, they bleed into each other. And it's like it's an evolution of.
Yes, I call it a fusion. Like
fusion. Yeah,
there's like it's complementary. And it's organic in many ways.
Mm.
It's easily traceable. It's really beautiful, actually, because it's a type of survival in a way. Like, it is survival. It's the only way the goddess could survive. But what's really fascinating about that is that the people are doing all of these, or are maintaining all of these characteristics. So then what that tells us is that there's something about us that we feel attached to certain symbols, like the bee, like milk, like mothering, like breastfeeding, like whatever, you know? And so it seems like we really want or need a divine feminine, because it's like, this is the last one, let's say in this, in Christianity, and like people are holding on to her for dear life, and have created this magnificent being. When I was a kid, Mary was my everything. Like, the Virgin Mary was my everything, right? Because I grew up very Catholic. And then when I went to school and I broke with that tradition, it really broke my heart to like have to contend with the fact that that was actually sort of a fan fiction story, that Mary was probably a woman who just gave birth to a guy who was probably a fantastic guy. And so I had to really contend with that. And then I still kind of felt called to the goddess. And it's really only recently where I've been sitting there thinking like, man, I really wish I spent my childhood worshiping the goddess the way I think about her today. And then I think, but I did.
Oh, I see.
But it was just, it was in the only option that I had as a kid growing up in a very Catholic household,
It's almost like I don't know if you're familiar with Carl Jung, but it's almost like his archetypes.
Right.
There's that great mother archetype. It doesn't really matter what you call it. It doesn't matter if it's Mary or if it's Kybele, but it still fills, as long as it's filling that role psychologically, the needs are being met.
Yeah.
Because these are he was big into like, these things can heal you. Like, these ideas are like meant to like be invoked or useful in ways where it actually like helps out your psyche, like, what I mean?
Yes. And the other things that connect Artemis and Mary are things like their titles. So Mary, Artemis is often called the goddess of the first throne. Mary is often called the queen of heaven.
Yeah.
Right. Even though Artemis has no children, there's this concept that she is the mother of the Ephesians, and she feeds them and takes care of them. And of course, Mary is the mother. And then they have these characteristics that are similar. They have these characteristics as the core redemptrix, like we talked about before, where Artemis has Apollo and Mary has Jesus. So they have this sort of dual relationships or dual leadership where they share leadership. And so they have these unique characteristics that really connect them too. People have used Mary to, if you think about it, how many goddesses could really be connected? You can't really connect Athena too much to Mary. Perhaps Demeter a little bit, but I'm not sure. Hera, and so Isis, like you said, you had a conversation with someone about Isis, because Isis, I think, is the one of the most clear connections, because Isis is holding Horus in the same way that eventually Mary holds.
Right. The divine childbirth. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very clear, what do you call it? Visualization. Right. So there are a few it's interesting actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
You also have Dionysus' first incarnation, where his mother is Persephone.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and I know some people compare that Persephone to Isis being the queen of the underworld, and so Isis being married to Osiris, who's the king of the underworld. And there's like that, so it's crazy. There's a lot. The overlaps are interesting because it's not one to one.
Yeah,
this god doesn't equal that god. I hate when people do that. I used to do it all the time. And then I started learning more. Now I'm like, wow, I really, that's like, you can't do that.
Yeah,
every god is their own god.
Yeah,
there is overlaps.
Yes,
but sometimes you'll see like the best example is this. Diodorus of Sicily tries to compare Osiris and Bacchus. There's a lot of these like people. Some people say that they're the same god or whatever, but like when you think about it, I get why they do that. They both have like the connection to the divine, and grapes, and they're both like fertility, whatever. But Osiris also is like a Pluto, and because he's the king of the underworld.
Yep.
And you can't like it's like there's overlaps between certain gods. Like one god can look like two different gods at the same time, and then another god can have overlap with this god. But
Yeah.
then this god has nothing in common with that god, and there's like a triangle going on here. Like you see that happening with these.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
I think because we live in a society or in a culture or a globe where people have categorized and boxed gods,
Yes.
and the ancients didn't live like that.
No.
You know, they could do this like 3 or 4 or 5 dimensional thinking at the same time.
Right.
You know, they can go right, like they could go from village to village and understand that Artemis is called, you know, something here and called something here and called something here, and represent like a wolf or a bear or a tiger or whatever, but still it's the same divinity. Like they could do this.
They saw it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, maybe perhaps because they understood that the gods are part of the village stories, of the tribal stories.
Yes.
You know, like almost like they saw that gods fit into the human lives.
And they represent nature itself too.
Yeah.
So like a sun god in one place is called something, but it might be called something else in another place, but it's still the sun god.
Yeah.
So like, we call it Helios, or they call it this, and they call it Horus over there. But so they see like the connection between in nature.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, this god's represented by the star Saturn.
Yeah.
Oh, so is this god. Okay, so maybe they're the same. Like they do the connections that way.
Yeah. I think that they were a lot more advanced in their thinking about spirituality than we are, because they lived in this sort of multi-dimensional world with many, many different gods, and they allowed their gods the freedom to shift and change. And they didn't go like, oh no, this is my Artemis, right?
Right. The dogma wasn't really there. It was more free.
Yeah. And so I often fantasize about living in those times and participating in those rituals, because it's hard for us sometimes to wrap our minds around how expanded their thought was, and how chill they were about it. Like, oh, you have a story about Artemis too, and she does this here. Oh, that's cool. You know,
and people will always say when you fantasize about living in like the ancient Greece or something, people will say, how hard life was back then. You can't just pull out your phone and order food. You got to go and make the food. Like, all right, yeah, fair point. But can you still imagine walking through Athens in like 400 BC? Imagine the columns, imagine the art, imagine how amazing that would look and feel to be there.
Yeah.
Like you can't, I don't care what you say about hard living. You cannot tell me that it wouldn't be amazing to take a walk through Athens.
Yeah.
2,500 years ago.
And I think
it'd be neat.
Yeah. And I mean, the processions they had, even for Artemis, for example, they had this big procession on the 6th of May for her birthday in Ephesus. But I mean, it was like a massive party that was funded by the government. And so each senator, each person, each emperor, each whoever came to power was trying to outdo the last one by how many things they would give to Artemis and to the people. So how much food they give, how much wine they give, free clothes, free entertainment, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So it's such a different world.
You wanted to be famous in that sense. So
That's
you're trying to outdo the person before you so you can have that like fame and glory of this was a great leader,
That's right. And in fact, they talk about how in Ephesus, the 6th of May is like would be equal to our Christmas.
Oh,
like
really?
It was such a massive, it was like a month of preparation and parties and food and all these and sacrifices and things. And then on the 6th of May, it's her actual birthday. And so then that would be like Christmas Day,
wow.
And people would have the entire month off, right? To prepare, to celebrate, to purify, to do whatever.
What was the name of that festival? Do you know?
So it is on
Artemisia, right?
I think it's the Artemisian. They go by Ortygia. No, I think it's just the Artemisian festival on May 6th. I can't remember the Greek name for May.
Me neither. I have no idea because I know there's different calendars depending on what time period.
Yeah,
so
they have. Yeah, they have what do you call it? Yeah, so but that was her birthday because they actually argued that she was born in Ortygia, the Ephesian Artemis. So you know how she's supposed to be born at Delos for the Greeks.
Yeah.
The Ephesians actually gave her another birthplace near them.
Oh, I see.
So they
That's also like how there's two different Mount Idas. Like
right.
the people that were living in Crete, they had their own Mount Ida story,
Yeah.
and it's Mount Ida. It's right there. Then you go to Phrygia. Yeah, Mount Ida. It's right here. What are you talking about? It's not in Crete. And it's the same. They have the same mythology, but it's the same mountain, but it's in different location. It's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
And I think Olympus was like that too. I think there's a bunch of different Olympuses, but
There are different places for where Olympus could be.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And you know what's really interesting? I was just reading some of my stuff today, and I came across this story of this image of Mary in this catacomb, in this Roman catacomb, and she has horns.